A millionaire buys an abandoned mansion in the Portuguese countryside. On the third night, he finds a young virgin waiting for him. She says she already knew him. If you like love and romance stories, watch until the end. Subscribe to this channel and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from.
Victor Harrison gazed out the window of his office on the 23rd floor of the commercial building in Manhattan, but his eyes didn't see the beach activity below. For 7 years, since that rainy dawn in Long Island when he lost Laura and little Gabriel in an accident that still haunted him, his life had transformed into a succession of cold business deals and empty nights. At 45, Victor had built a real estate empire stretching from New York to the south, but each professional achievement only accentuated the emptiness he carried in his chest. His secretary knocked on the door, interrupting his somber thoughts. Helen always knew when not to disturb him, but this time she brought something different in her gaze. "Mr. Harrison, this envelope arrived for you." It came from Pine Ridge, from a law firm representing the Aldridge family. Victor frowned. He didn't know this family, but the name sounded vaguely familiar, like an echo of something long forgotten. He opened the heavy envelope with old letterhead paper. It was an invitation to a private auction scheduled for the following week. A historic property was being sold, Green Hope Manor, built in 1847, located in an isolated region of the Pine Ridge Mountains. The attached photographs showed an imposing building of American neoclassical architecture, with gardens overtaken by vegetation, and windows that seemed like tired eyes observing anyone who dared approach. There was something in the image that disturbed him inexplicably. It wasn't just the melancholic beauty of the abandoned mansion, but a strange sensation, as if that place was calling him by name. Throughout that week, Victor couldn't get the mansion out of his head. He cancelled important meetings, ignored calls from anxious investors, and spent hours researching the property online. The Aldridge family had been one of the most influential during the Civil War era, owners of plantations with direct connections to Washington's elite. The mansion had been built as a summer residence to house the family's youngest daughter, Isabella, who, according to historical records, had mysteriously disappeared in 1889, shortly before the turn of the century. On the morning of the auction, Victor drove his BMW through the winding roads of the New York upstate mountains. The office responsible for the sale was in an old house in the historic center of Pine Ridge, and when he arrived, he noticed that few interested buyers had shown up. Perhaps the isolated location of the property deterred most buyers, or perhaps there was something more he still didn't understand. The auctioneer, a gray-haired gentleman with thick glasses, conducted the session with the solemnity of someone selling sacred relics. Victor made a modest initial bid, but soon realized there was no real competition. In less than an hour, he had become the new owner of Green Hope Manor for a surprisingly low price for a property of that caliber. "You made an excellent deal," said the auctioneer, handing him the heavy wrought-iron keys. The family waited a long time for the right buyer. It seems they finally found him. Victor found the observation strange, but didn't give it much importance at the time. He received the property documents and a detailed map to reach the mansion. Located 15 miles from the town center, on a dirt road that wound through century-old eucalyptus trees, the journey to the property was like a journey to the past. With each turn, modern civilization became more distant, replaced by a wild and melancholic landscape that seemed preserved in time. When he finally spotted the mansion at the end of an avenue of imperial palms, Victor felt his heart race in a way he hadn't experienced in years. Green Hope Manor was even more imposing than in the photographs. Its stone and lime walls displayed the golden patina of centuries, and the carved wooden windows reflected the afternoon sun like eyes guarding secrets. The garden, although overtaken by vegetation, still preserved the elegance of its original design, with marble fountains covered by moss and stone paths leading to shaded retreats. Victor parked in front of the main wrought-iron gate and walked slowly to the entrance. The keys turned easily in the ancient lock, as if the house had been waiting for him. The interior surprised him. Contrary to what he imagined, everything was perfectly preserved. The mahogany furniture still occupied its original places, the tapestries on the walls maintained their vibrant colors, and the air carried a sweet rose perfume that defied any logical explanation for a house abandoned for decades. He walked through the ground floor rooms with the reverence of someone exploring a cathedral. The visiting room, with its burgundy velvet sofas and grand piano covered by a silk shawl. The dining hall with its table for 12 and crystal chandelier that still shone as if it had been cleaned the day before. The library, with shelves reaching the high ceiling and thousands of volumes that seemed to whisper untold stories. It was when he climbed the marble staircase toward the second floor that Victor felt the first real strangeness. The steps creaked under his feet with an almost musical melody, and at the top of the stairs, a long corridor extended toward the shadows. Several doors lined the corridor, all closed, except one at the end which was ajar, letting a thread of golden light escape. He approached the open door with his heart beating faster. It was a feminine bedroom, decorated with a delicacy that contrasted with the imposing nature of the rest of the house. Lace curtains filtered the afternoon light. White provincial-style furniture gave lightness to the environment, and the double bed was impeccably made, with embroidered linen sheets that seemed to have been stretched just minutes ago. Victor entered the room feeling like an intruder, but something irresistibly attracted him to that space. On the nightstand, some books were carefully arranged, and beside them a cut-glass perfume bottle still held some of its original content. It was the same sweet aroma he had smelled throughout the house, more intense there, almost palpable. He approached the window and observed the gardens below. The property extended for acres of preserved forest, and in the distance he could see the valley disappearing among the bluish mountains. It was a place of wild and melancholic beauty, perfect for someone who wanted to hide from the world. Perfect for someone like him, who had spent the last 7 years running from real life. He decided he would spend the night in the mansion. He had brought a suitcase in the car, anticipating this possibility, and the idea of sleeping in that place seduced him in a way he couldn't explain. Perhaps it was just the need for silence after so many months of urban noise. Or perhaps there was something deeper attracting him to those century-old walls. When night fell over Green Hope Manor, Victor prepared to sleep in the bedroom he had found open. There was no electric light on the property, but he had found candles and kerosene lamps that worked perfectly, as if someone kept them in usable condition. The house gained an even more mysterious atmosphere under the flickering light of the flames, with shadows dancing on the walls and whispers of the wind that seemed like ghost conversations. He lay on the soft bed, surprised by the comfort of the ancient sheets, and for the first time in years felt that he could have a peaceful night's sleep. The silence of the mountain embraced him like a maternal hug, and gradually Victor surrendered to the accumulated fatigue of a lifetime of tensions. It was then, on the threshold between wakefulness and sleep, that he heard the first footsteps in the hallway. Victor opened his eyes slowly, not sure if he had dreamed or if he had really heard footsteps in the hallway. The bedroom was bathed in the silver light of the full moon, filtering through the lace curtains, creating delicate patterns on the wide plank floor. The silence was now absolute, broken only by the distant sound of crickets in the forest surrounding the mansion. He checked his watch. 3:07 in the morning. A time that made him shiver since that terrible dawn 7 years ago, when he received the call from the hospital. He always woke up at this time, as if his body had forever memorized the exact moment his life was split in half. But this time something was different. He didn't feel the usual anguish, just a strange expectation, as if waiting for something that was about to happen. It was then that he saw her. Sitting in the velvet armchair by the window, a young woman observed the nocturnal landscape with a serenity that defied any rational explanation. She had long black hair that flowed like silk down her bare back, and wore only a white cotton nightgown that highlighted the luminous paleness of her skin. Her bare feet lightly touched the floor, and when she turned to look at him, Victor felt the air escape from his lungs. It was impossible to determine her age precisely. She could be 20 or 30, but there was something in her dark eyes that suggested an experience far beyond any earthly youth. Her features were delicate, almost ethereal, with naturally rosy lips and an expression of melancholy sweetness that touched Victor unexpectedly. "Victor," she whispered, and her voice was like the murmur of wind through leaves. "You took so long to arrive." He sat up in bed, his heart beating erratically. He should be frightened, should scream or run, but instead he felt strangely calm. as if that vision were the most natural thing in the world. "Who are you?" he asked, his own voice sounding hoarse and distant. "How did you get in here?" She smiled, and it was as if a candle had been lit in the room. "I've always been here. This is my home, Victor." "Our home. Your home?" "But I just bought it." "Bought?" She tilted her head, amused. "No one can buy what already belongs to them. You didn't come here by chance. You came because I called, because it was time to return to me." Victor shook his head, trying to organize his thoughts. Maybe she was an intruder, someone who had taken advantage of the abandoned mansion for shelter. But how to explain that she knew his name? How to explain the strange sensation of familiarity he felt looking at her? "What's your name?" he insisted. "Isabella," she answered, rising from the armchair with fluid movements. "Isabella Aldridge. Though names don't matter much here, do they? What matters is what we feel for each other." She approached the bed slowly, and Victor noticed that she moved differently from other women he had known. There was no calculated seduction in her gestures, but a disconcerting innocence, as if it were the first time she approached a man. At the same time, there was an ancient determination in her eyes, as if she knew exactly what she wanted, and was only waiting for the right moment. "Isabella Aldridge." Victor repeated the name, feeling it familiar on his tongue. "Are you related to the former owners of the mansion?" "I'm the youngest daughter of the family," she replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "The one who disappeared before they could deliver me to the man they had chosen for me." Victor frowned. "For that was in the 19th century. "It was," she simply agreed, as if the temporal impossibility was irrelevant. "And here I am, waiting for you since then." He should question, should demand logical explanations, but when Isabella extended her hand to touch his face, Victor felt a wave of heat course through his body. Her fingers were cold, but her touch awakened sensations that he had buried along with Laura 7 years ago. It was as if she had the key to parts of his soul that he himself had forgotten. "You've suffered greatly," she murmured, tracing the lines of tension around his eyes. "Lost people you loved. I know what it's like to carry that pain, Victor. I, too, lost everything that was important to me." "How can you know that?" "Because I recognize the pain in the eyes of those I love. It's the same I've carried since they locked me in this room, waiting for me to accept a destiny I didn't choose." Her eyes filled with deep sadness. "But now you're here. Now we can console each other." Victor felt divided between the inexplicable attraction he felt for this mysterious woman and the voice of reason screaming in his mind. All of this was impossible, irrational, dangerous. But at the same time, for the first time since his family's death, he felt truly alive. "I don't understand what's happening," he admitted. "You don't need to understand," Isabella whispered, moving closer. "You just need to feel. Let me take care of you, Victor. Let me be your peace." When she lay down beside him, Victor felt the sweet perfume emanating from her skin envelop him like a mist. It was the same aroma he had perceived throughout the house, but now he recognized its source. It was her smell, intoxicating and familiar like a childhood memory he couldn't locate. Isabella rested her head on his chest, and Victor felt the delicate weight of her body against his. She was real, she was tangible, but at the same time there was something ethereal about her presence, as if she were made of dreams and moonlight. "Why me?" he asked, caressing her silky hair. "Because you're the only one who can save me," she replied, her voice muffled against his skin. "And I'm the only one who can save you." They remained that way until dawn, Victor awake, trying to process the impossible, while Isabella slept in his arms with the confidence of a child. When the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the curtains, she slowly dissolved like morning mist, leaving only the rose perfume and the persistent sensation of her lips on his skin. Victor got up dazed, questioning his own sanity. Had he dreamed? Had he suffered a nervous breakdown? He walked around the room looking for signs of her presence, but found nothing. The sheets were exactly as he had left them. The armchair by the window showed no sign of having been occupied. He went down to the mansion's kitchen, surprised to find everything working perfectly. The old refrigerator was connected and functioning. There was fresh food in the pantry, ground coffee in sealed cans. It was as if someone had prepared the house for his arrival, taking care of every detail. He prepared a strong coffee and sat on the back porch, observing the wild garden that extended to the forest. The morning was clear and fresh, with birdsong echoing among the century-old trees. Everything seemed normal, rational, explainable in the daylight. Perhaps he had really dreamed of Isabella. Perhaps it was just his disturbed mind creating fantasies to escape the pain he carried. But when he returned to the bedroom to take a shower, he found a single white rose on the pillow, still wet with dew, with a note written in delicate calligraphy, "I'll return tonight. Wait for me." Thais Victor held the rose with trembling hands, feeling its sweet perfume rise to his nostrils. It was real. She was real. And his life, which had been just a succession of empty days for the last 7 years, had just gained a purpose that he couldn't understand, but that both terrified and seduced him at the same time. That night, he would wait for her. The days that followed transformed into a strange and addictive routine. Victor cancelled all appointments in New York, inventing excuses for Helen about a necessary rest period. In the morning, he explored the mansion and its surroundings, discovering fascinating details about the property. There was a library with more than 3,000 volumes, many of them very rare first editions, and in the drawers of a mahogany desk, he found documents of the Aldridge family that revealed fragments of Isabella's history. She had been born in 1867, the youngest daughter of a plantation baron who owned land in 3 states. At 17, she had been promised in marriage to Vincent Aldrich, a Portuguese merchant of noble descent who had made his fortune in America. The engagement had been arranged by the parents, as was customary at the time, but according to the letters Victor found, Isabella had violently resisted the union. The similarity of the fiancé's name to his own deeply disturbed Victor. Vincent Aldrich, Victor Harrison, it was an impossible coincidence to ignore, and when he found an oil portrait of the man in one of the rooms of the house, he felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The features were identical to his, the same dark, intense eyes, the same firm line of the jaw, even the small scar on the chin that Victor had acquired in a teenage fight. The nights became the center of his existence. Isabella always appeared after 3 in the morning, emerging from the shadows of the room like a vision from another world. Their conversations were long and intimate, permeated by silences loaded with sexual tension that Victor struggled to control. She talked about her life in the 19th century, with the clarity of someone who had lived those moments just a few days ago, describing balls in Washington, train trips to New York, the smell of the plantations, and the sound of slaves singing in the early hours. "I was different from other girls of my time," she told him one of those nights, lying next to him while he caressed her silky hair. "I read forbidden books, questioned my father's decisions, dreamed of knowing the world beyond the plantation fields. When they learned of my engagement to Vincent, I ran away to this house. It was my secret refuge, the only place where I felt free." "And what happened when he found you here?" Isabella's eyes darkened. "He locked me in this room, said I was his property, that he had paid good money for me to my father. Every day he would come to try to convince me to accept the marriage. When persuasion didn't work," she touched an almost imperceptible mark on her wrist, as if it were the memory of ancient shackles. Victor felt a dull anger burn in his chest. The idea of that man hurting Isabella awakened in him a primitive fury that he couldn't explain. "And you never gave in?" "Never. I preferred to disappear rather than surrender to him." She looked at him with a disturbing intensity. "But now you're here, Victor, and you're different from him." "I can feel it. How can you be sure?" "Because you touch me with reverence, not possession. Because your eyes have pain, not cruelty. Because when you're with me, your hands tremble with desire, but you wait for me to allow before touching me." It was true. Since the first night, Victor had felt a devastating attraction to Isabella, but something in her ethereal fragility made him contain his impulses. It was as if she were made of crystal and could break at the slightest brusque movement. The supernatural manifestations of the house intensified as his relationship with Isabella deepened. Mirrors showed reflections of both, even when he was alone in the rooms. Doors he had left open appeared closed, and vice versa. The piano in the main hall played by itself during the early hours, always the same melancholic melody that seemed to echo the sadness of the mansion. On one of these nights, when Isabella slept in his arms, Victor heard voices coming from the garden. He carefully got up so as not to wake her and went to the window. Down below, translucent figures walked among the trees, men and women dressed in 19th century clothes, conversing in whispers that reached him like the murmur of dry leaves. "They are the others," said Isabella, who had awakened and approached him. "The people who died in this house over the years. They stayed trapped here like me. Why? Because this place holds the most intense emotions. Love, hatred, despair, passion. Everything becomes impregnated in the walls, in the air, in the very earth. Whoever dies here carrying very strong feelings can't leave." Victor felt a chill. "And you? Why did you stay?" "Because I died loving someone I could never have." She looked at him with infinite sadness. "And because I knew that one day you would come for me. But I didn't know you before I came here. Not with this face, Victor. But our souls have known each other for a long time." In the days that followed, Victor began to notice changes in himself. He slept little, ate even less, and felt increasingly disconnected from the outside world. When Helen called from the office, her voice seemed to come from very far away, like an echo of a life that no longer belonged to him. His business, which before had been his only reason for existing, became abstract and unimportant. All that mattered was Isabella and the hours they spent together. She was his obsession, his redemption, his new reason for living. When she wasn't with him, Victor wandered through the house like a ghost, counting the minutes until she would appear again. It was on a Thursday afternoon, as he walked through the back gardens, that he heard the sound of a car approaching on the dirt road. It was the first visitor since he had moved to the mansion, and Victor felt immediate irritation. Whoever it was, they were not welcome. Not now, when he had finally found peace. The car was a white Jeep with New York license plates. From it descended a woman of approximately 40, brown hair tied in a practical ponytail, wearing jeans, leather boots, and a white linen shirt. She carried a leather folder and a professional camera. "Mr. Victor Harrison?" She approached with a professional smile. "I'm Megan Scott, from the National Historic Preservation Institute. We received information that you recently acquired this property, and since it's listed as a historic interest asset, we've come to conduct a routine inspection." Victor observed her with distrust. There was something about Megan that bothered him. Perhaps it was her confident posture, or the direct way she spoke, so different from Isabella's ethereal sweetness. She represented the outside world, the concrete reality he had left behind. "I wasn't informed about any inspection," he said, blocking the entrance to the house. "It's just a formality. Mr. Harrison, it won't take much of your time. I need to photograph some environments and verify the state of preservation of the structure." Megan studied him with intelligent eyes. "Are you all right? You seem tired." Victor avoided her gaze. He really hadn't been sleeping properly for weeks, and he knew his appearance must reflect that. "I'm just adapting to life in the countryside. May I come in? I promise I'll be quick." He hesitated, but realized that refusing would be even more suspicious. "Very well, but I prefer to accompany you during the inspection." Megan nodded and followed Victor into the house. As soon as she crossed the threshold, he felt a change in the air. The lights flickered, a cold breeze swept through the corridor, and from upstairs came a noise as if someone had slammed a door with force. "Problems with the electrical installation?" Megan asked, raising an eyebrow. "The house is old," Victor muttered, but his uneasiness grew. He felt Isabella's presence somewhere nearby, and her energy was agitated, almost furious. While Megan examined the ground floor rooms, making notes and taking photographs, Victor noticed that she was more perceptive than she appeared. She asked intelligent questions about the history of the property, noticed details that would escape most people, and there were moments when she stopped and looked around, as if she sensed invisible presences. "This preservation is impressive," she commented in the library, running her fingers along the spines of the ancient books. "It's almost as if someone had been taking care of the house all these years. Perhaps the former owners left caretakers," Victor suggested, but his voice sounded false even to himself. Megan looked at him with a skeptical smile. "Perhaps it was when they went up to the second floor that the problems began. The temperature dropped several degrees, even though it was a warm summer afternoon. The doors began to close by themselves, and from Isabella's room came the sound of something being dragged across the floor." "How interesting," Megan murmured, heading exactly for the room Victor wanted to avoid. This room has a very peculiar energy. When Megan entered Isabella's room, Victor felt as if the air had been sucked from his lungs. The preservationist stopped in the center of the room, slowly turning as she observed each detail with trained eyes. Her camera captured images of the provincial furniture, the lace curtains, the impeccably made bed. "This room is remarkable," she said, her voice echoing strangely in the space. "The preservation is too perfect. It's as if it had been inhabited until yesterday." She approached the nightstand and picked up the perfume bottle that Victor knew so well. This container still has contents. French perfume by the glass patterns. 19th century, Victor swallowed hard. Perhaps the former owners left some things behind. For more than 100 years, Megan uncorked the bottle and smelled the aroma. Her eyes widened slightly. Impossible. This perfume is fresh. Someone uses it regularly. At that moment, the temperature of the room plummeted even further. Victor saw his own breath form a mist in the air, and Megan rubbed her arms, clearly uncomfortable. The curtains began to stir without any wind, and from the corridor came the sound of heavy footsteps, as if someone were pacing back and forth impatiently. "Mr. Harrison," Megan's voice had lost its professional confidence. "There's something you're not telling me about this house." Before Victor could respond, the door of the room closed with a bang that echoed throughout the mansion. Megan ran to it and tried to open it, but the handle wouldn't move. It was locked from the inside, which was impossible since there was no key. "Calm down," Victor tried to reassure her, although his own heart was racing. "It must be some problem with the old lock." "Old locks don't lock themselves," Megan retorted, her voice tense. "And they don't make the temperature of a room drop 15 degrees in a matter of seconds." It was then that she appeared. Isabella materialized in the darkest corner of the room, her figure gradually becoming more solid until she was completely visible. She wore the same thin white cotton dress, but this time there was something different in her expression. Her dark eyes shone with a dangerous intensity, and her lips were curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Who is this woman, Victor?" asked Isabella, her sweet voice contrasting with the coldness of her gaze. "Why is she in my room touching my things?" Megan instinctively backed away, her back pressed against the door. Her eyes darted between Victor and the apparition, trying to process the impossible she was witnessing. "Isabella," Victor tried to calm the situation. "This is Megan. She works for the government, came to inspect the house. It doesn't mean anything." "Doesn't mean anything?" Isabella's voice rose an octave, and the objects in the room began to tremble. "She's here in our home, questioning our life, photographing our intimate moments. And you say it doesn't mean anything?" Megan found her voice, though it came out trembling. "Victor, who is this woman? How did she appear out of nowhere? This is impossible." "Is it impossible that I'm in my own house?" Isabella approached Megan, her bare feet making no sound on the floor. "Is it impossible that I exist because your little scientific theories can't explain me?" You're dead," Megan whispered, the pieces fitting together in her mind. "Isabella Aldridge disappeared in 1889. You should be more than 150 years old." "I should," Isabella agreed, stopping a few centimeters from Megan. "But love doesn't know the rules of time, does it, Victor?" Victor felt divided between two realities. On one hand, the woman who had become his obsession, his reason for living. On the other, a stranger who represented the rational world to which he had belonged until a few weeks ago. But seeing Megan there, trembling with fear and confusion, he realized how his own situation must seem insane to the eyes of any normal person. "Isabella, let her go," he pleaded. "She hasn't done anything wrong." "Hasn't done anything?" Isabella's eyes inflamed. "She came here to separate us, Victor, to take me away from you. I can feel her attraction to you, the way she looks at you when she thinks I'm not watching." Victor looked at Megan, surprised. There really was something in her eyes beyond professional fear, a personal concern that seemed to go beyond her obligations as an institute employee. I just wanted to help," Megan stammered. "Victor, you need to leave this place. This woman, this thing, it's not natural. It's doing something to you." "Thing?" Isabella's voice became icy. "I am the woman he loves, the only one who can heal the pain that has been corroding his heart for 7 years. How do you know about—" Victor began to ask, but Isabella interrupted him. "I know everything about you, my love. I know about Laura and Gabriel. I know about the accident. I know how you blame yourself every night. How you used to wake up screaming until you found me." She approached him, touching his face with cold fingers. "I know that before me you were dead inside. I brought you back to life." Megan observed the interaction with growing horror. "Victor, listen to me. This woman is manipulating your emotions. She's using your pain as a tool of control. This isn't love. It's emotional parasitism." Isabella turned to her with a fury that made the entire room vibrate. "You don't understand anything about our love. Victor chose to stay with me. Chose to belong to me." "Belong?" Megan straightened, her courage returning. "Healthy relationships aren't about possession. They're about partnership, mutual growth, freedom of choice. You keep him prisoner in this house, isolated from the real world." "The real world?" Isabella laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. "The real world that rejected him after he lost his family? The real world where he couldn't sleep, eat, live? I offered him peace, offered unconditional love, offered a golden prison," Megan retorted. "And now that someone has appeared to question that, you show your true nature, a possessive entity that feeds on the pain and loneliness of others." Victor felt as if he were being torn in half. Everything Megan said made rational sense, but everything he felt for Isabella was real, intense, transformative. She really had saved him from the emptiness that consumed his life. "Victor," Isabella turned to him, her eyes pleading, "will you believe this stranger who barely knows me? Or will you trust the woman you love, who spent entire nights consoling your tears?" "Victor," Megan said softly, "look at yourself. When was the last time you ate a complete meal? When was the last time you talked to a friend, to your family? You're disappearing just like she disappeared in the 19th century. He looked at his hands and realized that Megan was right. He had lost considerable weight in the last few weeks. His clothes were loose, his skin pale, his eyes sunken. It was as if part of his vitality was being gradually drained. "I am happy," he said weakly. "For the first time in 7 years, I am happy." "Are you?" Megan challenged. "Or are you just numb?" "There's a difference between true peace and escapism. Victor, you were a successful, influential man. You had a life, even if painful. Now you're a shadow of yourself, living a fantasy that takes you further and further from reality." Isabella approached him from behind, embracing him possessively. "She wants to destroy us, Victor. She wants to take you back to that empty life, to that unbearable pain. Do you really want to go back there?" Victor closed his eyes, feeling Isabella's sweet perfume envelope him as always. For a moment, he almost completely surrendered. But something in Megan's words had planted a seed of doubt in his mind. When had he become so dependent on Isabella? When had his passion for her transformed into a desperate need? "I need time to think," he finally said. Isabella's reaction was immediate. The room shook, the window glass shattered, and an icy wind swept through the environment. Her ethereal beauty momentarily distorted, revealing something darker underneath. "Time?" Her voice echoed as if coming from a deep well. "You want time to convince yourself to abandon me, to choose her instead of me." "It's not about choosing someone," Victor tried to explain. "It's about understanding what's happening to me, to us." But Isabella was no longer listening to him. Her gaze had fixed on Megan with murderous intensity. "You," she hissed, "you came here to destroy everything. But I won't allow it." At that instant, Megan screamed in pain. An invisible force threw her against the wall and she collapsed on the floor, a bloodstain spreading on her forehead where she had hit. "Isabella, stop!" Victor ran to Megan, kneeling at her side. She was conscious but clearly injured. "You've chosen." Isabella's voice was now a venomous whisper. "You chose her instead of me. But know one thing, Victor Harrison. No one leaves this house against my will. No one." And with those words, she disappeared, leaving only the echo of her threat lingering in the cold air of the room. Victor held Megan in his arms, feeling the warm blood stain his shirt. She was pale, but her eyes remained focused, watching him with a mixture of concern and determination that touched him in an unexpected way. It was the first time in weeks that someone had looked at him as a real human being, not as an extension of their own desires. "I need to take you to a hospital," he said, helping her sit up. "No," Megan held his arm with surprising strength. "We can't leave this room now. She won't allow it. And if we try to force it, it could be worse." As if she had heard her words, the door of the room locked with a sinister click. Victor got up and tried to open it, but the handle wouldn't move even a millimeter. It was as if the entire house had transformed into a prison. "Isabella." he shouted. "Let us out. Megan is hurt. She needs medical attention." Only silence answered his cry, a silence so deep it seemed to suck the sound of his own words. But Victor could feel her presence somewhere in the house, watching, waiting, planning. Megan managed to stand up with his help, leaning on him as she examined the wound on her forehead, using the reflection of an antique mirror on the wall. The cut wasn't deep, but it bled abundantly. "There must be some cleaning products in the adjoining bathroom," she said, trying to keep her voice firm. "At least I can stop the bleeding." Victor helped her to the small bathroom adjacent to the bedroom, surprised to find it impeccably clean and stocked. There were soft towels, fragrant soaps, even a first aid kit in a drawer, as if someone had prepared everything for that moment. While Megan cleaned the wound, Victor observed his reflection in the mirror. He was startled by what he saw. His face was skeletal, deep circles surrounded his eyes, and his skin had a cadaverous pallor. It was as if he were slowly dissolving, losing substance with each day he spent in the mansion. "My God," he whispered. "What has she done to me?" "What you allowed her to do," Megan gently corrected, watching him through the mirror. "Victor, this woman, this entity, it's not a common ghost. It's something much more dangerous. I've seen similar cases in other historic properties." "What kind of cases?" "Spirits that feed on the vital energy of the living. Usually they're people who died in extremely intense emotional states, obsessive love, hatred, despair. They remain trapped between worlds, unable to move on, and end up becoming emotional parasites." Victor sat on the edge of the bathtub, feeling the weight of the revelation. "But I feel like she truly loves me. When I'm with her, the pain of losing my family diminishes. She makes me feel complete." "That's exactly what this type of entity does," Megan explained, finishing tending to the wound. "She identifies your deepest pain and offers relief, but it's false relief. It's like a drug. You feel better temporarily, but with each dose you need more, until you can no longer live without it." Victor remembered the past weeks, how he had become completely dependent on Isabella's presence. He couldn't eat when she wasn't around, didn't sleep properly without feeling her touch, found no pleasure in anything that didn't involve being with her. "But she knows me so well," he protested weakly. "She knows things about me that I've never told anyone. Because she has access to your mind when you touch. Each time you allow her to get close, she drains a little more of your essence and absorbs your memories, your most intimate feelings. That's how she maintains the illusion of true intimacy." Megan approached him, her brown eyes shining with genuine concern. "Victor, I know it's difficult to accept, but you need to understand. The woman you fell in love with doesn't exist. She's a projection of your own desires and needs, fed by the energy that this entity steals from you." Victor felt tears burn his eyes. For the first time since arriving at the mansion, he cried for real, not the tears of relief he shed in Isabella's arms, but tears of mourning for an illusion that was beginning to crumble. "I don't want it to be true," he admitted. "After Laura and Gabriel's death, I was dead inside. Isabella made me feel alive again." "You can feel alive again," Megan said softly, touching his face with delicacy. "But in a real, healthy way. The pain of loss never completely disappears, Victor, but you can learn to live with it without letting it consume you." At that moment, Victor realized he was really seeing Megan for the first time, not as an intruder or a threat, but as a real woman with her own scars and strength. There was something in her eyes that spoke of personal losses, of battles fought and won. "You also lost someone," he said, more a statement than a question. Megan nodded. "My husband. Cancer 3 years ago, and for a long time I too lived like a ghost, just existing without really living. The difference is that I chose to fight to get out of that darkness, instead of hiding from it." Before Victor could respond, the bathroom was invaded by a blast of icy air. The lights flickered violently, and in the mirror behind them Isabella's image appeared, her eyes inflamed with fury. "So that's how it is," her voice echoed off the tiled walls. "Abandon years of true love for the first stranger who plants seeds of doubt in your mind." "Isabella," Victor stood up, facing the mirror. "We need to talk. About us, about what you really are, what I am." Isabella laughed, a sound that made the glass tremble. "I am the woman who saved you from madness. I am who consoled your tears, who warmed your bed, who gave you reason to continue living. And now you reject me because of a stranger." "She's not a stranger," Victor said, surprising himself with the firmness of his voice. And you're not who I thought you were. No? Isabella's image approached the surface of the mirror, her face distorting into something less human. Then perhaps it's time to show who I really am. The mirror shattered into millions of fragments, cutting through the air like a rain of crystal. Victor pushed Megan back, protecting her with his body, while the shards flew around them. When they finally stopped falling, the bathroom was in ruins, and carved on the wall where the mirror had been, words appeared in ancient calligraphy: "Who enters my house never leaves again." "We have to find a way out of here," Megan whispered, cleaning small cuts on her arms. "She won't let us," Victor replied, but there was growing determination in his voice. "But maybe there's another way." "What do you mean?" "When I found the family documents, there were references to a final confrontation between Isabella and Vincent Aldrich, the fiancé she rejected. According to the records, he locked her in this room until she accepted her condition, but she never accepted. And then she died here, in this room. And her death was voluntary." Victor paused, the implications becoming clear in his mind. She killed herself to escape him. And she's been trapped here ever since, waiting for someone who could free her from the very prison she created. Megan observed him with growing understanding. "You think she really wants to be freed?" "I think part of her does, yes, the part that died for love of freedom. But there's another part, the part that feeds on pain and loneliness, that wants to keep me here forever." They returned to the bedroom, now illuminated only by the weak light of the afternoon, filtering through the torn curtains. The atmosphere had changed. The air was heavy, loaded with an expectant energy, as if the house itself were holding its breath. "Isabella," Victor called, his voice echoing in the silence. "I know you're listening to me. We need to end this, once and for all." Slowly, she materialized in the center of the room, but this time it was different. Her appearance oscillated between the sweet young woman he had known and something much darker. Her hair floated as if she was submerged. Her eyes sometimes shone with love, sometimes burned with hatred. "You want to leave me," she said, her voice a mixture of plea and threat. "After everything we've been through together, after all the love we've shared." "It wasn't real love, was it?" Victor asked, feeling his heart break even knowing it was necessary. "It was possession. It was fear. It was two lost souls clinging to each other to avoid facing the truth." Isabella approached him, her eyes imploring. "But you were happy with me. You were at peace." "I was numb," Victor admitted. "And you were using my pain to feed your own escape from reality." "We were both running away, Isabella. But we can't run forever. So you're going to abandon me? Leave me alone here in the darkness?" Victor looked at her, feeling a deep compassion mixed with his growing resolution. "I'm not going to abandon you. I'm going to free you. I'm going to give you what no one ever gave. True choice. The chance to move on." Isabella's eyes filled with tears that shone like pearls in the golden light of the setting sun. For a moment, she was once again just the 19-year-old girl who had died defending her freedom. "What if I don't want to leave?" she whispered. "What if I want to stay here with you forever?" "Then it will be your choice," Victor said softly. "But it will be a choice made with knowledge of the truth, not based on illusions or manipulation." And at that moment, Victor knew that the time for the final decision had arrived. Victor's confession about giving Isabella a true choice provoked a reaction that neither expected. The entire room began to pulse like a giant heart, the walls breathing in and out, while Isabella twisted in a visible internal struggle. Her form oscillated between the passionate young woman and something much older and more terrible. "You don't understand what you're asking," she moaned, falling to her knees in the center of the room. "I didn't choose to stay here, Victor. I was forced. And now I don't know how to leave anymore." Megan cautiously approached, her training in historical restoration awakening preservation instincts that went beyond objects. "Isabella, what really happened that night in 1889? What did Vincent Aldrich do to you?" Isabella's eyes fixed on Megan with a mixture of hatred and despair. "He locked me here for months, said I was his property, that the money he had paid my father bought me as if I were cattle. Every night he came to my room, tried to break me, forced me to accept the marriage." "Did he rape you?" Victor asked, feeling an ancestral fury burn in his chest. "He tried, many times, But I resisted, always resisted, until one night when he arrived more violent than ever, Isabella covered her face with her hands. I took a piece of broken glass from a mirror he had shattered in his anger, and when he approached, "You killed him," Megan completed, understanding. I plunged the glass into his neck. I watched the life escape from his eyes as he drowned in his own blood. Isabella raised her face, and for a moment Victor saw not the sweet young woman he had known, but a fierce and desperate survivor. But when I realized what I had done, when I saw his inert body on the floor of this room, I knew I would never leave here. I would never be truly free. "So you took your own life," Victor said softly. "I used the same piece of glass. I preferred to die free than to live as a slave." Her tears now fell abundantly. "But death didn't free me, Victor. It trapped me here forever, along with his anger, with the pain, with all the hatred these walls absorbed." Megan knelt beside Isabella, and surprisingly, she managed to touch her shoulder. The entity didn't disappear or move away. On the contrary, she seemed to solidify even more under the compassionate human touch. "Isabella, you were a victim. What you did was self-defense. You didn't deserve to be trapped for that." "Deserve?" Isabella laughed bitterly. "It's not about what I deserve. It's about what I am now. After more than 100 years feeding on the pain of others, sucking the life from lost men like Vincent. Like Victor. I've become the monster he always said I was." Victor felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "Other men? Were there others before me?" Isabella looked at him with infinite sadness. "You thought you were the first to feel attracted to this mansion, to buy it without hesitation, to fall in love with the mysterious woman who lived here." She pointed to a drawer in the dresser. "Open it. See for yourself." With trembling hands, Victor opened the indicated drawer. Inside he found dozens of photographs, newspaper clippings, documents. All showed different men, from different eras, but all with a disturbing resemblance to him and to the portrait of Vincent Aldrich he had seen downstairs. 1923, William Archwood, he read one of the newspaper clippings. Coffee businessman mysteriously disappeared after buying historic property in Pine Ridge. He took another. 1956, Victor Ullman, New York industrialist, found dead in mysterious circumstances at Green Hope Manor. And yet another. 1989, Vernon Adams, real estate broker, disappeared without a trace. With each name, each date, Victor felt his world crumble a little more. All had similar names, all were close to his age when they disappeared. All had histories of personal loss that had left them vulnerable. "My God," he whispered. "How many were there?" 8, Isabella answered, her voice now almost inaudible. 8 men over more than a century. All of them loved me. All of them believed I was their salvation. And all of them died, Victor completed, feeling nauseous. "You killed them. Not directly, but I drained so much of their life force that their bodies simply gave up. Like yours is giving up now." She touched his face, and Victor realized how her fingers were even colder than before. "The difference is that this time I don't want it to happen. This time I truly fell in love." Megan, who had been listening in silence, finally spoke. "Isabella, if you truly love Victor, you will let him go. You will break this cycle. And stay here alone forever? Return to being just a shadow waiting for the next lost man who will appear?" Isabella shook her head violently. "I can't. I'm not strong enough." "You were strong enough to resist Vincent Aldrich for months," Victor said, finding his voice. "You were strong enough to choose death over slavery. You can be strong enough to choose to let me go." "But I love you," Isabella screamed, and the scream made the windows shatter in a cascade. "For the first time in more than 100 years, I feel something beyond hunger and loneliness." "You love the idea of me," Victor gently corrected. "You love what I represent. Companionship, relief from loneliness, someone to fill the void. But true love, Isabella, true love wants the best for the loved one, even if that means letting them go." Isabella looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face as if trying to memorize every detail. "And if I let you go, will you forget me?" "Never," Victor promised, and it was true. "You taught me that I can still feel passion, that I can still desire someone. That's a gift I'll always carry with me. And you?" Isabella turned to Megan. "Will you take care of him? Will you help him not to get lost again in the pain?" Megan held Victor's hand, their fingers naturally intertwining. "If he lets me." Victor looked at Megan, really seeing her for the first time. He saw the strength in her brown eyes, the determination in her posture, the small scar on her chin that spoke of a life really lived, with stumbles and achievements. He saw a woman who had faced her own losses and chosen to move forward, not run away. "I would like that," he said sincerely. Isabella closed her eyes, a single tear rolling down her face. When she opened them again, there was a serene resolution in her gaze that Victor recognized from the first night, the same expression she must have had when she chose death over submission. "Then so be it," she whispered. The room began to glow with a golden light that seemed to come from within the walls themselves. The rose perfume intensified until it became almost palpable, and Victor felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in weeks, as if an invisible weight were being lifted from his shoulders. "Isabella," he called, but she was already becoming translucent. "Be happy." "Victor," she said, her voice echoing as if coming from far away. "Be truly happy this time." And then something unexpected happened. Instead of simply disappearing, Isabella began to transform. The bitterness and hunger that deformed her features dissolved, revealing the young woman she had been before everything. Beautiful, strong, free. For an instant she shone like a star, pure life energy finally released from its century-old prison. "Thank you," she whispered, and her gratitude was directed at both Victor and Megan. "Thank you for reminding me of what I really was." The light intensified until it was blinding, and when Victor could open his eyes again, he was alone in the room with Megan, but not completely alone. In the gentle breeze that entered through the open windows, he could feel a benevolent presence like a silent blessing. Isabella had departed. "Finally free. Is it over?" Megan asked softly. Victor tested the door. It opened easily. He looked out the window and saw that the property seemed different, less somber, more welcoming, as if a dark cloud had dissipated. "It's over," he confirmed. Then he turned to Megan, seeing her with new eyes. "But perhaps it's just beginning." She smiled, and it was the most beautiful smile Victor had seen in years. Real, warm, full of possibilities. Perhaps it is. When they left the room, Victor carried with him not only the memory of Isabella, but a precious lesson. Sometimes, loving someone means having the courage to let them go. And sometimes letting go is what allows us to find something even more true. The house, now silent and peaceful, seemed to approve of his decision. Through the windows, the sun was beginning to set behind the mountains, painting everything with golden tones of hope. The days that followed Isabella's departure were like a painful rebirth. Victor woke up every morning expecting to see her sitting in the armchair by the window, and with each confirmed absence, he felt a pang of genuine loss. It was no longer the destructive emptiness he had carried for 7 years after losing Laura and Gabriel, but a melancholic longing for something that had been real in its intensity, even if not true in its nature. Megan had stayed at the mansion during the first week, officially to complete her report on the historical heritage, but Victor suspected she was more concerned with his physical and mental state than with bureaucratic issues. She had transformed one of the guest rooms into her temporary office, spreading documents, old photographs, and equipment across the entire surface of the century-old mahogany table. "You need to eat properly," she said on a Thursday morning, entering the kitchen where Victor was sitting in front of a coffee cup that was growing cold without being touched. "You can't recover with just caffeine and willpower." Victor looked at her and was once again surprised by how much his perspective had changed. Megan wore a light blue blouse that highlighted her brown eyes. Her loose hair fell in natural waves over her shoulders, and there was a vitality in her movements that dramatically contrasted with Isabella's ethereal delicacy. It was the difference between a painting and a photograph, one beautiful but flat, the other real with all the imperfections and complexities that made life interesting. "I'm not hungry," he said, but it was a lie. His body was screaming for nutrition after weeks of being drained. "Liar," Megan smiled, starting to prepare scrambled eggs on the old stove. "Your stomach has been growling for 5 minutes. And look at you, you look like a scarecrow." It was true. His clothes were too loose, his face had lost its healthy fullness, and his hands trembled slightly, effects of the gradual malnutrition that Isabella had caused. But for the first time since arriving at the mansion, Victor felt real appetite. Megan placed the plate in front of him with a maternal gesture that touched him deeply. "Eat," Afterward, I want to show you something I found yesterday. Food had flavor again. Victor realized that during the weeks with Isabella, everything had lost its taste, as if his taste buds were numbed along with the rest of his senses. Now the creamy eggs, the toast with butter, even the simple coffee, all exploded in flavors that made him remember the basic pleasure of being alive. "Better?" Megan asked, watching him eat with evident satisfaction. "Much better," Victor admitted. "Thank you. For everything. Don't thank me yet. We still have work to do." After breakfast, Megan led him to the library, where she had organized a table full of ancient documents, photographs, and newspaper clippings. The research she had done on the mansion was impressive in its thoroughness. "I discovered some interesting things about this property," she said, pointing to an old architectural plan. Greenhope Manor wasn't built just as a summer residence. It was designed as a kind of sanctuary. The family patriarch, Jonathan Aldridge, had lost 3 children in successive epidemics of yellow fever and cholera. When Isabella was born, he commissioned this house specifically to protect her from the outside world. "Look here." She showed architectural details in the plans. Corridors that can be isolated, rooms with multiple secret exits, even a ventilation system that allowed air circulation without needing to open windows. Victor studied the documents with growing fascination. So the house was built to be a prison from the beginning? A golden prison, yes. Isabella's father loved her, but his love was possessive, controlling. When she grew up and began to show independence, he became even more restrictive. Megan picked up a handwritten letter with delicate calligraphy. This is a letter Isabella wrote to a cousin in New York, intercepted by her father before being sent. Victor read the letter, feeling his heart tighten. It was the desperate account of an intelligent young woman, passionate about life, but completely suffocated by the limitations imposed by her family. "Dear Constance, sometimes I feel like I die a little each day in this house. Father says he protects me, but how can it be protection something that prevents me from living? I dream of the day when I can walk the streets of New York, talk to different people, read books that I chose by my own will." She was a woman ahead of her time, Megan commented. She questioned the female role in society, was interested in politics, even wrote articles defending women's rights that were never published. And when her father promised her in marriage, it was the last straw. Vincent Aldrich was known to be even more controlling than Jonathan. There were rumors that he regularly beat the slaves and treated his mistresses with brutality. Megan showed a yellowed newspaper clipping. When Isabella ran away to this house, she wasn't just running away from marriage, she was running from a life that would be worse than death. Victor felt a deeper understanding of Isabella's tragedy forming in his mind. She hadn't become a vengeful spirit out of malice, but out of desperation. She had been a victim of a society that denied women any agency over their own lives. And the other men? The ones she trained? Megan hesitated before answering. All of them had specific characteristics: recent traumatic losses, social isolation, tendencies to control in relationships. It's as if she was attracted to men who repeated toxic patterns, perhaps trying to recreate and resolve the original trauma. Including me. Including you. Megan looked at him directly. "Victor, you know that after your family's death you developed worrying behavior patterns, don't you? Extreme isolation, refusal to form close bonds, need to control every aspect of your professional life to compensate for the feeling of powerlessness in your personal life." Victor knew she was right, but hearing it verbalized was uncomfortable. "And you think that's why I felt attracted to someone like Isabella? Because she offered total control?" "Not total control, total surrender, which is the extreme opposite but equally dysfunctional." Megan approached him, her voice becoming softer. "Victor, you spent 7 years punishing yourself for the death of Laura and Gabriel. You carried a guilt that wasn't yours. You isolated yourself from the world as if you didn't deserve to live. Isabella offered a way to continue punishing yourself, but in a way that felt like a reward." Her words hit him like punches, but necessary punches. "So you're saying I was looking to be destroyed? I'm saying you were looking for a way to die without having to kill yourself. And you found that in Isabella." Victor was silent for a long moment, processing the painful truth. Then he said, "And now, how do I live differently?" By starting slowly, Megan replied, touching his hand. Learning to forgive yourself. Allowing yourself to form real, imperfect connections with real and imperfect people. People like you. She smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. Victor, I don't want to be your next obsession. I don't want you to transfer the dependence you had on Isabella to me. It's not that, he said quickly, then stopped. Was it? Was he simply replacing one fantasy with another? How can I be sure? By asking yourself if you would be capable of living without me, Megan answered honestly. If the answer is no, then you're not ready for a healthy relationship yet. Victor considered the question seriously. The idea of Megan leaving saddened him, but didn't make him desperate. He didn't feel the compulsive need to possess her that he had felt with Isabella. I would be capable, he finally said. It would be sad, but I would be capable. Good, she nodded, seeming relieved. Then perhaps we're on the right path. That afternoon they walked through the gardens of the mansion, which seemed to be reviving after Isabella's departure. Flowers that had been wilted were beginning to bloom again, and a family of birds had built their nest in one of the imperial palms. I'll have to return to New York next week, Megan said, stopping in front of the marble fountain that now had crystal clear water running again. My report is almost ready, and I have other projects waiting. Victor felt a pang of sadness, but not of despair. I also need to return to my life. There are business matters to resolve, people worried about me. But you won't sell the mansion. He looked at the imposing structure that had been his prison and his salvation. No, I think I'll transform it into something useful, perhaps a support center for people who have gone through traumatic losses, a place where they can truly heal, not just hide. Megan smiled. Isabella would approve. Do you really think so? I'm sure. She spent her entire life fighting against prisons. She would love for her house to become a place of liberation for others. That night, Victor dreamed of Laura and Gabriel for the first time in months without waking up screaming. In the dream, they were at peace, smiling at him with approval. When he woke up, he realized that their faces in his memory were no longer frozen in the moment of tragedy, but alive, happy, as they had been in life. It was a sign that, finally, he was ready to begin living again. For real this time. The return to New York City was like plunging into icy water after months in a warm bath. Victor drove through the busy streets of Brooklyn, feeling like a foreigner in his own city. Everything seemed louder, more aggressive, more artificial after weeks in the tranquility of the Pine Ridge Mountains. But paradoxically, he also felt more alive, more present than in recent years. Helen almost fainted when she saw him enter the office on Monday morning. His secretary for 15 years, she knew him well enough to notice the subtle changes, the brightness returning to his eyes, the less tense posture, the more natural movements. Mr. Harrison, how good to have you back, she exclaimed, poorly disguising her relief. I was beginning to worry. You seemed different in the last phone conversations. I was different, Helen, but I'm better now. Victor settled at his executive desk, observing the pile of contracts and reports awaiting him. Bring me a coffee, please, and let's see what we've missed. During the following hours, Victor immersed himself in work with renewed energy, but also with a transformed perspective. Projects that had once obsessed him now seemed like simple problems to be solved. The difference was subtle but fundamental. He had recovered conscious control over his life, instead of being driven by unconscious compulsions. It was at lunchtime that the first real test arrived. Charles Mitchell, his minority partner and one of the few people Victor considered a friend, appeared in the office with a concerned expression. Victor, we need to talk, said Charles, closing the door behind him. There are rumors circulating in the market about you. What kind of rumors? That you had a nervous breakdown. That you disappeared for weeks without giving explanations to anyone. Some clients are questioning whether they can trust their investments to someone unstable. Victor felt a pang of irritation, but not the explosion of anger he would have had in the past. And you, Charles, do you think I'm unstable? Charles studied him carefully. Honestly? You seem more stable than in the last few years. But you also seem different, as if something fundamental had changed. It has, Victor admitted. I have changed. And if that bothers some clients, perhaps they're clients I don't really need. Interesting boldness coming from someone who always prioritized the opinion of others above his own happiness. Charles observed with a half-smile. "May I know what happened up in Pine Ridge?" Victor hesitated. How to explain about Isabella, about the mansion, about everything he had experienced, without sounding completely crazy? "Let's say I found a way to make peace with my past. And did it involve a woman?" The question caught Victor by surprise. "Why do you ask that?" "Because there's something in your eyes that I haven't seen in years. A softness, and because—" Charles smiled mischievously. "Helen mentioned that you received several calls from a certain Megan Scott in the last few days." Victor couldn't help but smile. Megan had called 3 times since he returned to New York. Long conversations about work that inevitably drifted to personal matters. She was finishing her report on the mansion. But she was also helping Victor implement his idea of transforming the property into a support center. "She's a consultant in historical heritage," he said, trying to sound casual. "Of course she is," Charles laughed. "And I'm an astronaut." "Victor, I'm happy for you. Whatever happened in those weeks, it seems to have done you good." That afternoon, Victor found himself anxious for the end of the workday. He had arranged to meet Megan for dinner in Manhattan, and the expectation was different from anything he had felt before. It wasn't the desperate need he felt for Isabella, but something lighter, and at the same time more solid, genuine curiosity about who she was beyond work. Desire to know her opinions, her dreams, her stories. The restaurant was on West 57th Street, a discreet place that served contemporary American cuisine. Victor arrived first and chose a table that offered privacy without isolation, another sign of his emotional progress. In the past, he would have chosen a dark corner to hide. With Isabella, he would have chosen a place that excluded the rest of the world. Now he simply wanted a comfortable space for an intimate conversation. Megan arrived punctually at 8, wearing a simple but elegant navy blue dress that highlighted her figure without ostentation. Her hair was tied in a loose bun, and she carried a leather folder. Always professional, but this time there was also a gleam of expectation in her eyes. "How was the first day back to civilization?" she asked, settling into the chair across from him. "Revealing," Victor replied, serving wine for both. "I discovered that I can survive the real world without hiding from it. Significant progress. And you? How was explaining to your superiors that you spent an entire week on a routine inspection?" Megan blushed slightly. "Let's say I emphasized the exceptional architectural complexity of the property. Fortunately, my boss is passionate about colonial history and swallowed the explanation." During dinner, they talked about work, books, trips they would like to take. Victor discovered that Megan had studied architecture before specializing in historical heritage, that she played guitar in her spare time, and that her biggest professional frustration was seeing historic buildings being demolished for real estate speculation. "It's ironic," she said, tasting the grilled fish. "You profit by building new things. I fight to preserve the old ones." Not necessarily conflicting, Victor reflected. Conscious urban development should integrate historical preservation. In fact, he paused, an idea forming. "Megan, what if we combined our knowledge? You could be a consultant on my next projects, ensuring that we respect the existing heritage." Her eyes lit up. "You would do that, even if it meant less profit in some cases." "Profit is no longer my only priority," he said, and realized it was true. "I want my projects to have meaning beyond financial return." "Be careful," Megan joked. "Continue like this, and people will think you really had a nervous breakdown." "Maybe I did," Victor admitted. "But it was the best thing that happened to me in years." The conversation flowed naturally until late at night. When they finally left the restaurant, they walked along the Brooklyn Bridge under the stars, their hands meeting naturally. The touch was different from anything Victor had experienced, neither the desperate urgency he felt for Isabella, nor the tired familiarity of the last years with Laura. It was new, exploratory, full of possibilities. "Victor," Megan said when they stopped in front of the building where she lived in Brooklyn Heights, "I need you to know, so I don't want to rush. I don't want to be your savior or your next obsession. I want us to build something real at our own pace." "I want that too," he replied, gently touching her face. "For the first time in my life, I'm not in a hurry to get anywhere. I'm learning to enjoy the journey." She moved closer and kissed him, a soft and questioning kiss. Victor felt a wave of warmth and desire, but also something deeper, genuine connection based on who they really were, not on what they needed from each other. Good night? Megan whispered against his lips. Good night. Victor returned to his apartment in Brooklyn with a sense of completeness he hadn't experienced in a long time. But it was upon arriving home that the next challenge presented itself. Waiting for him in the lobby of the building was a woman he hadn't seen in more than 2 years. Patricia, Laura's sister. Victor, she stood up from the armchair where she was waiting. We need to talk. Patricia had inherited Laura's beauty, but where her sister had been sweet and understanding, she had always been direct and sometimes cruel. Her blue eyes examined him from head to toe with an expression that mixed concern and disapproval. Patricia, he greeted cautiously. What brings you here? You disappeared from the world for weeks, Victor. No one knew where you were, if you were okay, if you were alive. As the sister-in-law of my deceased sister, I still feel responsible for you. That's kind of you, but unnecessary. It is necessary, she retorted, following him to the elevator, because I heard that you're involved with another woman, so soon after everything. Victor felt the irritation rising, but controlled it. Patricia, Laura died 7 years ago. 7 years during which I lived like a walking dead man. If I finally found a reason to return to living, it should be a cause for joy, not judgment. You have the right to move on, she admitted, entering the elevator. But not to forget. Not to act as if Laura and Gabriel never existed. I will never forget, Victor said firmly. But I also won't live in the past anymore. Laura wouldn't want me to waste the rest of my life lamenting a tragedy I can't change. Patricia observed him in silence as they went up to the 20th floor. When they reached the door of his apartment, she said, You're different, more, present, but also more distant from the man my sister loved. Perhaps it's because the man your sister loved died in that accident along with her, Victor replied softly. And perhaps it's time to discover who I can be now. Patricia nodded slowly. Just don't completely forget who you were. There were good things in that man, too. After she left, Victor stood on the balcony of his apartment, watching the city lights spread to the horizon. He knew Patricia was partly right. There was the risk that in his haste to reinvent himself, he would discard positive aspects of who he had been before the tragedy. But he also knew he couldn't go back. The man Laura had loved was dead. The man Isabella had seduced was dead. Now he needed to discover who he could become, not to escape the pain, but to honor both his losses and his future possibilities. And Megan, with her gentle wisdom and silent strength, seemed to be the right person to accompany him on this discovery. 3 weeks after the meeting with Patricia, Victor was at his desk reviewing the architectural projects for the transformation of Green Hope Manor, when Helen entered his office with a concerned expression. Mr. Harrison, there's a man here who insists on speaking with you. He says it's about the property in Pine Ridge. He seems disturbed. Victor looked up from the documents, feeling a familiar uneasiness. What kind of disturbed? He's sweating profusely, his hands are shaking, and he keeps looking around as if expecting someone to appear. He said his name is Michael Turner. The surname made Victor freeze. Turner, like Isabella's original family. Send him in. The man who entered his office was approximately 50 years old, with disheveled grey hair and eyes that showed poorly slept nights. His clothes were of good quality but wrinkled, as if he had travelled in a hurry. He carried a worn leather folder that he held with visibly trembling hands. Mr. Harrison, he said, his voice hoarse with anxiety. Thank you for receiving me. I'm Michael Turner Aldridge, great-grandson of Jonathan, the builder of the mansion you acquired. Victor gestured to the chair in front of his desk. Please, sit down. How can I help you? Michael sat on the edge of the chair, as if ready to run at any moment. Mr. Harrison, I know it will sound crazy, but I came here to warn you about this property. It's not safe. Not safe in what sense? My family has carried a curse for generations. My great-grandfather, Jonathan, never forgave himself for Isabella's death. After she disappeared in the mansion, he plunged into a deep depression and began having visions. He said she appeared to him every night, asking to be freed. Victor maintained a neutral expression, but his heart accelerated. Continue. My grandfather, then my father, and now me. We've all been haunted by her. Dreams, apparitions, a constant feeling that someone is watching us. My father died young at 43 from a heart attack that doctors couldn't explain. My grandfather went completely insane at 60, spent the last days of his life murmuring her name. Michael opened the folder with trembling hands and removed a series of old photographs and documents. And it wasn't just with our family. All the men who bought this mansion over the years. They all died or disappeared in mysterious circumstances. Victor examined the photographs that Michael spread on the desk. They were the same men whose photos he had found in the drawer of Isabella's room, but these showed their final conditions. Cadaverous faces, empty gazes, postures of men who had given up on living. Mr. Harrison, Michael leaned over the desk, his eyes pleading. You seem like a good man, a man who deserves to live. Please, sell that property. Find a way to get rid of it before it's too late. Michael, Victor said calmly, what if I told you I already met Isabella and that she's already gone? The man looked at him as if he had said something impossible. Impossible. She never leaves. That's how the curse works. She seduces vulnerable men, consumes them slowly until there's nothing left of them, and then waits for the next one. But I survived, Victor insisted. I met Isabella, I freed myself from her, and she moved on. I don't think you freed yourself, Michael shook his head vigorously. But what if it's just what she wants you to think? What if she's simply waiting for the right moment to pull you back? Victor was about to respond when his phone rang. It was Megan, and her voice was clearly altered. Victor, you need to come to Pine Ridge now. What happened? I'm at the mansion finishing the final photographs for my report. But, Victor, she's back. Isabella's back and she's furious. The call dropped, leaving Victor with the silent phone in his hand and Michael watching him with an I told you so expression. It was about the mansion, wasn't it? Michael asked. She's back, isn't she? Victor was already getting up, grabbing his car keys. Michael, thank you for the warning, but I need to go to Pine Ridge immediately. Don't go! Michael stood up too, desperate. If you go back there, this time she won't let you escape. But Victor was already leaving the office, Helen shouting questions behind him as he ran to the elevator. During the entire journey to Pine Ridge, driving through the mountain curves, well above the speed limit, his mind seethed with possibilities. Had he underestimated Isabella? Had he been naive to believe she had really freed herself? He arrived at the mansion in the late afternoon, under a sky heavy with dark clouds that threatened a storm. Megan's jeep was parked in the courtyard, but something was wrong with the atmosphere of the place. The feeling of peace that had settled after Isabella's departure had disappeared, replaced by an electric tension that made the hair on his arm stand on end. The front door was ajar, swinging slightly with the wind. Victor pushed it and entered, calling for Megan. His voice echoed through the empty corridors, but there was no response. It was then that he heard the piano. The same melancholic melody that Isabella used to play echoed through the main hall, but there was something different about it now. A dissonance, wrong notes that created a disturbing and threatening harmony. Victor followed the sound and found Megan in the hall, sitting at the piano playing with mechanical movements. Her eyes were empty, as if she were in a trance, and when he called her name, she didn't respond. "Megan!" He ran to her, touching her shoulder. She abruptly stopped playing and turned to him, but the eyes that stared at him weren't Megan's warm brown eyes. They were Isabella's dark and ancient eyes. "Hello, Victor," said Isabella through Megan's lips. "I missed you." Victor instinctively backed away. "Isabella, what have you done to her? Megan has nothing to do with this." "Oh, but she does." Isabella stood up, moving Megan's body in a way that wasn't natural for her. "She was the one who convinced you to abandon me. She was the one who planted doubts about our love. It's fair that she pays for it." "Our love wasn't real," Victor shouted. "It was possession, parasitism. You admitted it yourself." "I lied." Isabella smiled with Megan's lips, an expression that was completely foreign to that face. "I said what you wanted to hear so you would lower your guard. You really thought that more than 100 years of solitude would be healed by a few nice conversations about freedom." Victor felt the world crumble around him. So everything was a lie. Your departure, your liberation. It was theater, my love. A performance to make you believe you were free. But you were never free, Victor. From the moment you stepped into this house, you belonged to me. And when you brought this woman to challenge me, you only gave me a way to ensure you would never try to leave again. Let her go, Victor begged. If it's me you want, leave Megan alone. Oh, but now she serves my purposes perfectly, Isabella laughed. A young, strong body without the traumas that complicated our relationship. And best of all, you love her, don't you? That means you'll never try to hurt her, even knowing it's me who controls every movement. Victor looked at Megan's face, searching for some sign that she was still in there fighting. For a moment he thought he saw a flash of panic in her eyes, as if she were trapped inside her own body, conscious but powerless. Megan, he whispered, if you can hear me, fight. Don't let her win. She can't fight, Isabella mocked. She's weak, Victor. She doesn't have the strength necessary to resist me. Unlike you, who fought against me for weeks before surrendering. I didn't surrender, Victor said, his voice gaining strength. I chose to leave. And I choose to leave again. But now you can't leave without her, and she goes with me wherever I go. Isabella approached him, using Megan's body. Unless you want to leave her here, trapped forever in a house that will become her tomb. Victor realized he had fallen into a carefully planned trap. Isabella had used his own emotional evolution against him. She knew that now he was capable of true love, and therefore would never abandon Megan to the fate that other men had suffered. What do you want? He asked, defeated. What I've always wanted, Isabella replied, touching his face with Megan's hands. For you to stay with me. Forever. No more escapes, no more resistance. Accept that you belong to me and I'll let her live. Resist, and she'll die slowly as I drain every drop of life from her body. Victor looked at the face of the woman he had learned to love, controlled by the entity that had almost destroyed him, and knew he had reached the moment of final choice. But this time it wasn't just about his own freedom. It was about saving the only person who had shown him how to truly live. And for the first time since meeting Isabella, Victor knew exactly what he needed to do. Victor looked at Megan's face, controlled by Isabella, and felt something he hadn't experienced during his months of emotional captivity. Absolute clarity. Not the desperate surrender that had characterized his first interaction with Isabella, nor the paralyzing fear he felt now, but a deep understanding of what needed to be done. You're right, he said, surprising Isabella with his sudden calm. I love you, Isabella. I always have. The dark eyes shone with triumph. Finally, you accept the truth. But not in the way you imagine. Victor approached, not Megan, but directly Isabella, looking through the borrowed eyes to the ancient soul that hid behind them. I love you as I love an injured part of myself. I love your pain because I recognize my own pain in it. I love your fear of abandonment because I spent 7 years feeling the same fear. Victor, what are you doing? Isabella's voice had lost part of its confidence. I'm giving you what you never truly had, he replied, gently touching Megan's face, but speaking to the entity that controlled her. I'm offering you love without possession, compassion without submission. Isabella, you never knew real love. Not with Vincent Aldrich, not with me, not with any of the other men. Were you lying when you said you loved me? There was now a note of vulnerability in Isabella's voice. I wasn't lying, but I confused need with love, hunger with passion. What we felt for each other was real, but it was the love of two broken people clinging to each other to avoid sinking. It wasn't the kind of love that heals. It was the kind that devours. Victor began to walk slowly around the piano, forcing Isabella to rotate Megan's body to follow him with her gaze. But do you know what difference Megan brought me? She showed me what it's like to love someone and want that person to be free, to be happy, even if it means losing her. Beautiful lies, Isabella spat, but her voice trembled. You only want to save her because she's useful to you. Want me to prove it? Victor stopped directly in front of her. Free Megan now. Let her go. And I'll stay with you forever by my own will without resistance. Isabella hesitated, clearly confused by the unexpected offer. You would stay, even knowing she would be safe away from here. I would stay, because I understand now that you're not evil, Isabella. You're just a woman who died very young, very hurt, without ever having experienced true love. If my company can give you peace, if I can teach you what I've learned about loving without possessing, then it would be worth it. For a moment, Isabella's control over Megan faltered. Victor saw a flash of the real brown eyes, a desperate blink that seemed to say, "Don't do this." But he continued. "The difference, Isabella, is that this time it would be a conscious choice, not based on desperation or escape, but on understanding and compassion. I can love you without losing myself, and I can let you love me without you needing to destroy me to feel secure." "You would do this for her?" Isabella asked, and for the first time in their many conversations, Victor heard true doubt in her voice. "I would do this for both of you. For her because she deserves to be free to live her own life, and for you because you deserve to know what it's like to be loved without being feared." Isabella closed Megan's eyes, and when she opened them again, there were tears streaming down the borrowed face. "Would you really let me go if I asked?" "I would," Victor replied without hesitation. "The moment you wanted to leave, I would say goodbye to you with gratitude for what you taught me about myself." It was then that something happened that neither of them expected. Isabella began to sob, and they were sobs of more than 100 years of loneliness, fear, and distorted love finally finding expression. Megan's body trembled with the intensity of the emotion, but Victor realized it was Isabella herself who was crying, not her host. "I don't know how to love without possessing," she admitted between sobs. "I was never taught. My father possessed me in the name of protection. Vincent wanted to possess me in the name of marriage. I learned that love and possession were the same thing." "They're not," Victor said softly, approaching and embracing Megan. But it was Isabella who received the embrace. "True love is wanting the other person to flourish, even if it's far from you. It's celebrating their happiness, even if you're not part of that happiness. Like Megan does with you, like Megan does with me, and like I want to do with her. And like," Victor made a significant pause, "I can learn to do with you." Isabella moved slightly away, studying his face through Megan's eyes. "You've changed. You're no longer the broken man I knew. I'm not. You helped me realize what I no longer wanted to be. Megan helped me discover who I could become. And now perhaps I can help you discover who you can be beyond the pain you've carried for so long. But if I free her," Isabella hesitated, "if I let Megan go, how do I know you won't abandon me too?" Victor smiled, and it was a genuinely warm smile. "Because for the first time, I'm not offering to stay out of fear, need, or desperation. I'm offering to stay by choice. And a promise based on free choice is much stronger than one based on coercion." Isabella was silent for a long moment, processing words she had never heard before. Finally, she said, "And if I can't accept just this, what if 100 years of hunger are stronger than a few weeks of lessons about true love?" "Then we try again," Victor replied patiently, "as many times as necessary. I don't give up on people I love, Isabella. I didn't give up on Laura when she was dying in the hospital. I didn't give up on myself in the worst moments of grief. And I won't give up on you." It was then that Victor noticed the change. The eyes looking at him through Megan's face began to transform. The ancient and hungry darkness was gradually replaced by something softer, younger. It was as if Isabella were remembering who she had been before the tragedy, before the fear, before loneliness transformed her into a predator. "Victor," she said, and her voice now had a different tone, not the calculated seduction or possessive fury, but a genuine vulnerability. "I want to try. I want to learn to love without destroying, but I don't know if I'm strong enough." "No one is strong enough alone," Victor replied. "But together we can be." Together. Isabella repeated the word as if it were a new concept, not one consuming the other, but both growing. "Exactly." Isabella closed her eyes once more, and when she opened them, there was a serene determination in her gaze that Victor recognized from the night she had chosen her first liberation. False, but still courageous. "Then let me begin by doing the first right thing I do in more than a century," she said. Slowly, carefully, Isabella began to separate herself from Megan's body. It was a visible process, like smoke being extracted, like shadow detaching from light. Megan staggered, and Victor held her as Isabella took her own form beside them. But this time, when Isabella fully materialized, it was different. She was still beautiful, still ethereal, but there was a humanity in her appearance that didn't exist before. Her eyes were less ancient, less hungry. Her smile was hesitant but genuine. "Megan?" Victor held her face between his hands, looking for signs of damage. "I'm fine," she whispered, her own voice gradually returning. I'm okay. She didn't hurt me. In fact, I think she protected me." Victor looked at Isabella, questioning. "She was conscious the whole time," Isabella explained, seeming almost embarrassed. "I kept her awake so you would know it was real, that she needed to be saved, but also so she could hear what you said, so she would know how you really feel about her." Megan turned to Isabella, her eyes shining with tears. Thank you, Isabella replied, "for showing me what true love in action is, not just in words." Victor looked between the two women who had transformed his life in such different ways and felt a deep peace settle in his chest. "And now, Isabella said, smiling almost shyly, "I would like to learn to exist without needing to consume others to feel real. Can I still stay in the mansion? Not as the owner, but as a guest?" "You can," Victor nodded. "In fact, I have plans to transform this place into a support center for people who have gone through traumatic losses. Perhaps you can help. Who better than someone who intimately knows the pain of loss to help others heal?" Isabella's eyes lit up with a possibility she had never considered. I could really help someone? Instead of just causing pain?" "You could," Megan said softly. "You could use all that experience with suffering to guide others back to life." "And you too?" Isabella asked, looking between them. "How will you stay together?" Victor held Megan's hand, intertwining their fingers. "If she wants." "I want," Megan replied, smiling through tears. "Very much." "Then," Isabella said, and it was the first time Victor had seen her truly happy, "I think we've all learned the most important lesson." "What lesson?" "That true love doesn't diminish when it's shared. It increases." She looked at the two with an expression of peace that Victor never thought possible to see on that face. "Thank you for teaching me the difference between loving and needing, between wanting someone and wanting the best for someone." 6 months later, Victor was on the porch of Green Hope Manor, watching Megan photograph the first restoration works. The support center was slowly taking shape, with the help of psychologists specialized in grief and trauma. And Isabella, gradually learning to exist without consuming, had become a gentle and wise presence on the property, offering unique comfort to those who had lost loved ones. "Are you happy?" Megan asked, approaching and leaning against him. Victor kissed her softly, tasting the flavor of a life truly lived. "I am complete. For the first time since I can remember, I am complete." And Isabella. They looked at the young woman who now tended the gardens with hands that created life instead of draining it. She had found peace not in possession but in purpose, and for the first time in more than a century, Isabella Aldridge was truly free. "She also found her way," Victor replied. "We all did." As the sun set behind the Pine Ridge Mountains, painting Green Hope Manor with golden tones of fulfilled hope, Victor knew he had learned the most precious of all.